I hate to break it to you, but finding the perfect tool for almost anything in your business simply doesn't exist. So in this video, I'm going to give you a simple, repeatable process to pick the right tools for your business. I'll show you the exact same process that we've used to find and implement the right software for over 300 different businesses. And if you stick around, I'll give you the research tools, an evaluation framework, and a scorecard to help make it easier to find the right software based on the unique needs of your business. Most people don't realize it, but the biggest problem in choosing software isn't really about the software itself. It's the mindset that we bring into the search process. Almost everyone starts with this idea that there's a perfect tool out there somewhere, the magical all-in-one system that's going to fix your operations, streamline everything, and fit every edge case with zero compromise. And the marketing makes this 10 times worse. ClickUp promises to replace all of your software. Monday claims that their agents will do the work for you. Airtable says that they'll deliver apps instantly. And when you hear a pitch like that, it's easy to believe that somewhere out there is a single platform that will solve every problem that your business has. But those promises rarely match the reality of day-to-day operations, and they set an expectation that no tool on the market can realistically meet. So what happens? You start searching, you watch reviews, you check comparison pages, you go down those rabbit holes of top 10 lists, most of which are driven by affiliate commissions and not real-world use cases. You spin up free trials, you bounce between different demos and try to make sense of conflicting Reddit posts, and eventually you pick something, you commit. You start shifting everything over from the old system and getting your team on board. And then that painful moment comes. The tool can't do something that you thought it could. A workflow feels clunky. A feature is locked behind an expensive tier. Your team gets confused by the interface, and instantly that doubt starts to creep in. Did I choose the wrong tool? Is there something better? Should I start over before I've gone too far? And that doubt kicks off this loop. You go right back into research mode. There's more reviews and more feature charts, more bookmarks, more trials. You're trying to find the perfect tool again, the one that finally won't disappoint you. But the deeper you go, the more all of these options start to blend together, and the harder it becomes to make a decision at all. And that's where the paralysis sets in. You're doing more research than actual implementation, and the original problem, the thing you were trying to solve months ago, still isn't fixed. But that entire cycle doesn't happen because you chose wrong. It happens because you were evaluating tools based on marketing promises, or broad comparison lists, or someone else's workflow instead of your own business needs. The perfect tool doesn't exist because every business is different. Your workflow, your team, your integrations, your clients. So the goal shouldn't be to find perfection. It's to find the tool that actually fits your environment and solves the specific problems that actually matter. Once you start to make that shift, everything is going to be simpler. You'll stop expecting a tool to do everything, you stop restarting your search every time you hit a limitation, and you start focusing on fit instead of features. The first thing that we need to do is look at the actual needs of our business. Now let me tell you a story of where I've seen this go wrong before. A new executive came into a small tech services agency. He knew that sales were slumping, and he thought a logical solution to help move things along would be to implement a new CRM. Now in the past, this executive had owned a chain of gyms, and he was very successful at acquiring new customers by sending automated SMS campaigns, something which his CRM at the time, High Level, was really good at. So he started to implement High Level for his new tech services agency. And within a couple weeks, it was clear that something wasn't working right. Yes, they had automated text messaging, but he found out that this didn't really help anything because these B2B prospects weren't especially interested in communicating over text. And the part of the sales cycle that actually needed improvement was in how quickly they were able to get proposals out the door and collect payment, something where High Level was actually a worse fit than the system that was previously implemented. Here, the executive had spent time and money implementing a new system because of his past experiences, marketing claims of being this all-in-one solution, and operating off of the broad premise that choosing a solution that was strong in automation would solve all of their sales problems. It becomes so much easier to choose the right system for your team if you can identify and articulate the core business challenge you're trying to solve and get as specific as possible. So in his case, saying we need a new CRM to help sales is far too general of a problem statement. The next layer down would be, hey, we have a sales velocity problem, which is essentially the speed in which we close new business. But as we explained, that was even still too broad. The executive chose a solution to help with speed, but he optimized for the wrong problem. Instead, if he had chosen a CRM based on it's taking us too long to get proposals to clients, he would have ended up with a very different solution. When you've identified the core business problem, then it becomes much easier to identify must-have features in the product. So let me give you another example. There's a services team who does project management for clients, and they've done a good job at identifying their core business problem, which is that their operational processes aren't tied very well to their project delivery work. It's hard to accurately invoice their clients. So they've identified the core problem, but now they need to understand features that would help better support this. They know that they need to have a time tracking solution where they can log time against the projects that will get billed to clients. They're using QuickBooks as their invoicing tool, so they know they need to have an integration to QuickBooks either as a native solution or third party. They need reporting mechanisms so that they can do forecasting and compare the actual against the estimates for their projects, and they want a client portal that will make it easy for their clients to see the big picture of what's actually going on. Now, it's ideal to get as laser focused as possible on those specific needs of your business, but there are also some common questions to ask yourself that apply to almost every software purchasing process. Questions like, what is my budget? And what is the total cost of ownership of the software? Total cost of ownership is a huge one to think about because aside from just the licenses of the software, how good is their support? Do you have to pay additional money if you want premium support? How much is it going to cost to actually implement the software? Do you need to pay money to the software vendor to implement it? Do you need to use a third-party consultant? Can you set up the software yourself in-house? All of those options have costs associated with it one way or another. You're going to be paying for it somehow. Another set of questions to think about is around user adoption, because the number one source of software purchases failing is because the team never actually uses the software, either because it's too difficult to use, it's cumbersome to migrate from existing systems, or there just isn't enough of a value add of the new software. So who is it that will be using the software, and what would make it a win for them to adopt it? For example, team-level resources need an easier way to manage their tasks and calendar. If we could make that process easier, they would be more likely to use it. But on the executive side, we need to make sure that we can have better reporting to improve our actuals versus estimates in forecasting. A third area to think about is how well will this new software connect and integrate into your existing ecosystem? Does it have native integrations to easily connect to your tools? Is there a Zapier integration so a non-technical person on the team would be able to connect it to other platforms? Is there an API available if we need to connect with our homegrown systems or other tools which might not have a Zapier connector? To help identify these kind of common questions, on our website, we evaluate all the different software with over 30 different questions that we ask about every single platform. You can use this to then form your own opinions on which software most accurately matches the criteria that you're looking for. If you're a business owner and you're doing it, this is a nice way to organize your thoughts and be more objective as you're making these big software buying decisions. So let's jump into a couple key resources here. The first one that I'm taking a look at is what I call an executive overview. And the goal of this is not to be verbose. We want to be something really snappy. And so I don't use ChatGPT for this. We're not trying to write this huge article. This should be like a 1 to 2 page overview that you could hand an executive in your business, and it would basically explain, here's the rationalization for why we need the software, what we're trying to solve, the key problems, the people involved, and it makes sense so that we can use this to inform how we're going to actually build our scorecard. So here we've already identified our core business problem. This is what we talked about before. And then this is really important if you can identify the business impact. So for example, in this case, we can reduce strain on operations by 15 hours per week by automating the invoicing. And then we've also identified that there's some customer churn, and we think we can fix some of that issue if we create a client portal with our project management software. Now, if you want this to be super impactful, you'll also consider talking about the payback period. Basically, how long is it going to take from the benefit that we're getting, right? We're reducing churn, we're reducing strain on operations. How long is that period going to take to actually pay back the costs that we're investing into the software? So for some software, that payback period might be 3 months. If it's really complex, it might be a year or more. And the other thing is that if you have the intel to turn that 15 hours into actual revenue numbers, or to say, well, what's 10% churn? How many dollars does that represent? Then you should be able to analyze the ROI as well. So what kind of ROI are we going to see from this project? Now, to be honest, analyzing ROI could be a whole different topic for another video. So we're not going to dig into it too much, but just know that the more you can tie this pain to the actual impact on revenue is going to really prioritize this project. Then I like to outline the stakeholders. The reason I do this is so that we think through the perspective of all of the different teams and what they need. So executives need to be able to forecast, so that's really a reporting requirement. Managers here need to better understand capacity issues, so it's also a reporting requirement. Our team members are doing dual entry, and so they need an easier system to actually manage the tasks. And hey, wouldn't it be great if we could integrate with Google Calendar? And our clients need visibility, and that's where we get that requirement for a client portal. So oftentimes what I see is a business owner who's like, yeah, we need better software because I need to understand what's my ROI or what's my projected revenue. And they're not really thinking about it through the lens of what their team needs. And that's where it can get a little bit messy. So make sure you're thinking through all of those needs for each set of stakeholders who this impacts. And then here we talk about our budget, and this is where we want to think about that total cost of ownership. So we have our licenses. How many users do we have? How much does it cost roughly that we think to budget for our licenses? And then what do we think support will be? And this might be that you're paying the software vendor. This might be an in-house resource that is going to do support for your team. No matter how you slice it, it's going to cost you money. So how much are you budgeting for that? And then usually you have some kind of upfront implementation. Again, it might not be paying the company that money, but if you need to have some integrations or other pieces with this, you really want to think about how are you getting this implemented and how much is that going to cost? So here we can talk about the total cost. Here's how much it'll cost each year, how much is one-off, and then this is what that first year total cost of ownership is going to be. Now, I love using tools like Google Docs or Notion because we can add these different things. Like I've got a nice tagging system, and we can say, here are requirements. Here's what a must-have is, a nice-to-have, an ideal state. Likewise, down below, we can put in chips for the actual timeline of when we're expecting each of these things to occur. And then finally, at the bottom, we'll have our recommendation after we go through the process and after we go through the scorecard. And I'm trying to keep this as simple as possible. We could make it big and fancy and a presentation out of all of it. But in all reality, most people just want to know the results. They don't need to know this whole flowery description for everything. So then the goal here is that we are assigning a number system. We are quantifying the actual results. So I think of it on a score of 1 to 10. You might do something as 0 to 10 or 0 to 100. That can really be up to you. But it really just depends on how complex it is and how many systems you're evaluating. But here, I'm not actually putting in the cost of the product. Here, I'm saying, hey, if we're evaluating these two against each other, how does this relate on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being the best here? So I want to quantify every single criteria that we have. Now, you might run into situations where something is binary. They either have this thing or they don't have this thing. And I'd probably just give it a 10 or a 0, depending on whether it has that feature or not. Now, as you go about the process, you're probably thinking, yeah, but I want to have some more qualitative information behind this as well. And that's totally fine. So I would do one of two things for qualitative or descriptive information. You could either add in an additional column. So ClickUp here would span 2 columns, and we could have the quantitative results here, and we could have qualitative results here where we talk and add descriptions of everything, and we add the actual costs. That's one way you could do it. Or instead, you could insert notes or comments with the more qualitative description information as well. It's really your preference. But the important part is that every single criteria has that same exact scale applied. Now, here's where it gets fun, is that I've added a separate sheet for weighting this information. Now, this is a step you don't necessarily have to take, but I think it's pretty important because the reality is that every single feature is not equally important to your team. Some features are going to be more important, some are going to be less important. You might say budget is the number one deciding criteria. We want to have a pretty decent tool that gets the job done, but hey, we're really hurting for budget, and so we want the cheapest option. So what the second page does is we can assign any weight that we want to a given criteria. And you don't really have to worry what it's out of. So for example, if cost was really important, way more important than anything else, we could up this to 25 if we wanted to and give it 25 points. And it doesn't really matter that this adds up, that all these weights add up to 59. It doesn't need to add to 100 or anything like that. It can add up to whatever it is. We just want this to be relatively accurate. We want to say, hey, if cost is really important to us, that's going to be a higher score. And the second column that we have is for the multiplier. Now, this might be kind of nerdy for some of you, and you don't have to really know what this does, but basically we're just saying, what is the relative weight out of the total? And then we're going to multiply that to take whatever score we assigned for ClickUp over here, multiply it by that so we get this score. Now that we have our evaluation scorecard in place, it's time for us to start the research process. During our top of funnel research, this is where we might watch videos, look at lists of different tools, and talk to people in our network about what has worked for them. Our goal is to identify those 3 to 5 platforms that we think are going to be worth evaluating more in depth and actually apply our criteria against. We also don't want to identify a list of these platforms that all look exactly the same. We intentionally want to include some variety, some diversity of platforms in the process. Now, when you're doing your top of funnel research, it's really important that you understand the bias that is inherent in the research process. So for example, if I do a Google search for best CRMs and I see this sponsored link from Forbes is a big name, and I click on this, now think about it. Forbes is paying Google. They're paying to sponsor their results. Forbes does not have their own CRM. So they're saying, hey, it is so lucrative for us to put together this list of affiliate links and then pay Google to have you land on our page, to click on our affiliate links, that this is their whole business model around this, that they create landing pages without a whole lot of details that are trying to get you to click to choose one of these platforms. So as I look at this and I'm like, wow, all of these CRMs have great ratings. I wonder how they evaluated this. There is no information about how they chose these scores. No, every single thing on this page, all of these items here, the get started, all of this information, all it does is it links through to affiliate links. So it's really important to understand the intent behind this information that you're getting. Is it trustworthy? G2 is one of the biggest known brands for helping people choose software. And you see all of these different lists that they put out of the best software. And you're like, I wonder why those pieces of software are ranked that way. Because sometimes it's very strange that you have resource management by Smartsheet and then Smartsheet, the main product, on the same list of the top project management software. How did we actually get that way? And then you find out that G2 pays people to evaluate the software, which they say doesn't affect the sentiment. But then you take a look at what actually comprises the scores. So for example, they say, does it meet your requirements? Well, person A who evaluates the software might have totally different requirements than person B who's evaluating the software. And so the criteria that they use, and then they use AI and everything else to aggregate this information, you see very highly aggregated, non-detailed information to determine how these platforms should actually rank. Now, everybody has biases. So on our website at softwarefinds.com, we try to highlight this information directly at the top about how we evaluate our process and how we make money. And the number one way that we make money is through implementation services. So when we say, hey, we can help you implement and automate and integrate all your different software packages, it doesn't make sense for me to be like, hey, yeah, check out this CRM. It's actually terrible for you, but I'm going to get paid from that commission. And the way that we primarily make money is through our implementation services. People pay us, and then we help set up their software, and we implement it, and we automate it, and we integrate together different software. So then it would be really dumb if I said, yeah, I'm going to manipulate all these different results here, because at the end of the day, if people get ticked at us for choosing the wrong platform, they're not going to want to work with us on services. So whether or not you come to Software Finds and use our tools or you use something entirely different, the most important part is to understand what's the bias behind this information and how does it apply to my business? Because if it's just this static list of top 10 whatevers, the tool that's going to work best for a services agency versus a product company are going to be two totally different tools. Now, once you've identified your 3 to 5 candidates, then it's time to properly evaluate the software. You'll want to update your scorecard throughout the process, and if possible, I'd recommend appointing a second person to do the evaluations with you. Ideally, you find a stakeholder with a different role as you. Now, depending on the software that you're evaluating, it's ideal when you can trial the software for yourself. In some cases, there aren't going to be free trials available, and you have to go through a software demo. In either case, it's important that you really stick to the criteria that you established for the decision-making process. Once we've filled out our evaluation card, then it's time to choose the software. I'd recommend that you go with the software that actually comes out on top in the evaluation process. If you're just starting the software selection process yourself and you need some help with that top-of-funnel research, check out the many videos we've created, including this one where we've highlighted some of the top CRMs to choose from after looking at 136 of them. I'll catch you in the next video.